So, I am on my way to Uisneach. I know, lucky me, right? I'm heading to Uisneach. It is Sunday the 5th of May. It is the time of Bealtaine. Summer has finally arrived in the astronomical sense, perhaps not in the meteorological sense just quite yet. And I'm going to the Mythical Fire Festival, which in the past decade has been reinstituted. And I say reinstituted because, pardon me, there is evidence that the Bealtaine Fire event was a thing at Uisneach, certainly in the early Christian period, or in the early medieval period. So today there is a northerly breeze and cloud has been coming in from the north. It's got a distinctly cool feel to it for the time of year. I think the temperature is below normal. Regardless, nevertheless, I don't think that will deter the crowds who are undoubtedly currently ensconced on the hill from enjoying the event. So what is Bealtaine? Well, Bealtaine, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, that may be because you've heard the English pronunciation, such as Beltane. There are a lot of people who call it Beltane, but in this part of the world it's pronounced Bealtaine. What is Bealtaine? Well, Bealtaine is an ancient festival. We don't really know necessarily exactly how old, but we can talk about the age of it in a few moments. Bealtaine is considered to be one of the cross-quarter festivals, coinciding with the astronomical cross-quarter days. And those are the dates that mark the halfway point in days between the solstices and the equinoxes. So in this case, Bealtaine marks the halfway point in days between the vernal equinox, the spring equinox, and the summer solstice. So if you count the number of days between the day of spring equinox and the day of summer solstice, you divide it in two, you get the date of the Bealtaine cross-quarter feast or festival. And so, just to run through the year, it is often said that the Celtic calendar begins at Samhain, at the beginning of winter and the beginning of the dark half of the year. So Samhain would coincide with the modern celebration of Halloween, when we still light bonfires all these centuries and maybe millennia later. We're continuing the Samhain celebration. And then we have winter solstice, generally falls on the 21st of December, and of course the closest equivalent in the Christian calendar is Christmas. And then the end of winter and the beginning of spring is marked by the Imbolc February cross-quarter date, which falls in early February, and a modern continuation of that might have been St. Bridget's Day. Then we have the vernal equinox, the spring equinox, when the sun's path through the ecliptic coincides with the celestial equator. And so when it's below the celestial equator, the sunrises and the sunsets happen south of east and south of west, and when it's above the celestial equator, the sunrises occur north of east and the sunsets occur north of west. I had to make sure I got that right. And then after the vernal equinox, which is celebrated for instance at Cairn at Loughcrew, the next significant date is Bealtaine, which is the beginning of summer and the cross-quarter date that we're celebrating today with the Fire Festival at Uisneach. And there follows the summer solstice in the middle of June, on the 21st of June generally. The longest days of the year, the days upon which in Ireland we get eternal twilight. We don't get dark night for 3 weeks either side of summer solstice, time of the year that I really love. But it's all too short and fleeting, and the year turns very quickly and it goes back again. But it doesn't turn that quickly, but it does after the autumn equinox, which is the next festival. And again, the sun shines into Cairn in Lough Crew on the mornings of the autumn equinox. And then, following the autumn equinox, we have, just watching his car, dangerously situated there, about to pull out, the autumn equinox, and then we have Samhain between autumn equinox and winter solstice. Now, why would those dates have been significant? And there is a dispute in academic circles pertaining to the real date and origin of the cross quarters, which are assumed to be relatively fairly modern in date, assumed to be of medieval date. Now, one of the difficulties with that is there appear to be several cairns which are prehistoric and definitely pre-medieval, which are aligned towards sunrises and sunsets at that time of year. So, to give you some examples, Cairn S at Lough Crew appears to be aligned for sunsets at this time of the year. Bealtaine and again at Lunasa in August. I have a feeling I missed that when I was going through the festivals. I missed Lunasa, didn't I? Between summer solstice and autumn equinox. Lunasa I did, coinciding with early August and the harvest. Sorry about that. At Cairn U at Lough Crew, the passage appears to be aligned so that the sun rises at Samhain, again the beginning of winter, and Imbolc, which you could say is the end of winter or the beginning of spring, shine into the passage there. Now these aren't exactly precise in that they appear to allow sunrises over a range of azimuths, or a range of, let's call them declinations, which means that the sun is actually probably shining in, especially into Cairn S, for several weeks, but certainly bracketing the summer. And I think that's the key point here. A very short passage at Donaneal, the mound of the hostages on the hill of Tara, appears to be aligned so that the sun rising at, again, Samhain and Imbolc shines into its short passageway. And an observer situated on top of the mound of the hostages, and I've done this and I've observed it, watching the sunsets on the opposite side of that axis, which would be the sunsets associated with Bealtaine and Lunasa, the beginning and the end of summer, would watch the sun setting into Cairn T on Lough Crew. And Cairn U at Lough Crew, the aforementioned Imbolc and Samhain sunrise alignment, points to the hill of Tara, and that's documented in my book Mythical Ireland, New Light on the Ancient Past. So I think one of the reasons those cross-quarter festivals would have been important in prehistoric times, and perhaps in Neolithic times, is because of the fact that they bracket the periods when the sun's rising and setting position on the horizon is, A, moving at its fastest, and B, moving at its slowest. So if you're to trace out the movement of the sun's rising position on the eastern horizon from summer through equinox into winter and back again, you would find that it doesn't at all move at a steady rate. If you were to plot it out every day over the course of a year, you would see that at the equinoxes, the sun's rising position and of course its setting position in the west are moving the fastest, and there's the greater distance between each sunrise. Whereas at the solstice points, which are called the standstills, and that comes from solstistere, meaning this motionless sun, or the standing still sun. In Irish, Grianstad, which literally means stopped sun. Well, you will notice that, of course, as we're approaching the solstices, the sun's movement appears to slow down quite dramatically, and like a pendulum on a giant clock, it comes to a halt, and then it moves again, and then it sweeps along, and it gets faster and faster, and it's fastest at the equinoxes, and then it starts to slow down again at summer solstice. And so Well, why would that have been important? Well, I think the reason it's important is because there is a clear demarcation of time at those periods of the year when the sun, as I say, appears to either quicken up on its journey up and down the horizon, or to slow down on its journey up and down the horizon. So Samhain and Imbolc bracket the winter period when the sun has gone through the autumn equinox and is beginning to slow down for its run into winter solstice and the stopping of the pendulum clock, the pendulum, and the swinging back again. And it picks up speed again at Imbolc. And conversely, Bealtaine today, or this time of year, all the way through summer solstice into Lunasa, is the period where again the sun is slowing down for its summer standstill on the horizon. So equally then there are two periods between the between the cross quarters when the bracketing is the opposite. It's bracketing the cross quarter dates are bracketing the quickest movement of the sun, and so from spring through the vernal equinox to early summer, Imbolc to Bealtaine marks the period when the growing sun is moving at its maximum pace along the horizon. And then after the summer solstice, from Lunasa through the autumn equinox into Samhain marks the period when the sun is at its quickest, around the time when it is starting to wane into the winter period. These cross quarter dates also coincide with noticeable changes in weather season growth patterns. So for instance at Imbolc you get the first flowerings of the spring. You start to see the blackthorn come into bloom. You might see, the snowdrops and the early daffodils. This period from Bealtaine through the summer solstice into Lunasa, I suppose, was probably the real critical period for the early farmers, those who created the great monuments of Loughcrew and Brunibonia and Carrowkeel and Carrowmore and all the other clusters of passage tombs around Ireland, that were said to have been constructed by the country's first farmers. And that's important because if you're a farmer, then you undoubtedly need, it's not just that you have a critical awareness, but you need to have an acute awareness of the seasons and the movement of the sun. And you would not just base your agricultural calendar around the two hooks. The hooks of the year are winter solstice and summer solstice, when the sun stops, and they're the hooks, they're the things where the sun's movement distinctly stops, and that's the only two periods of the year where it absolutely stops. The difficulty with equinoxes, and especially with cross quarters, is you actually have to count the days. You have to count the days, especially between the equinoxes and the solstices, to find the cross quarter dates. So one fascinating upshot of that is that you begin to see that for instance, midsummer coincides with the time of the greatest light and probably the greatest heat, although in Ireland sometimes we get heat waves into July and August. The cross quarter dates coincide with natural events and cycles and happenings. And so for instance, Lunasa is the sort of time of year where you want to be harvesting, and you reap the harvest of what you've sown earlier in the year. And then Samhain, there's a noticeable dying, at Samhain, which occurs in early November, that is the time of the year when the leaves are falling off the tree in great numbers, and the foliage has become discoloured, and you get all those sort of rusty browns, all the beautiful colours of autumn. And there appears to be a dying happening. And of course this is the season into which the Cailleach enters her greatest power. You know, the winter season, the season of death, when growth seems to stop completely and the earth seems to hibernate, and then, you know, certain things happen in terms of migrations. Actually, the funny thing about the Boyne Valley is that at Newgrange you get a considerable number of birds wintering there, including the whooper swans, but not just the whooper swans, which might be commemorated in the mythology of Brunebonia, but there are a lot of wintering birds at Newgrange. So you get seasonal migrations. It doesn't always signify periods of death or dearth, you know. Actually, in the wintertime, you can see great numbers, great flocks of birds that, you know, are clearly wintering there. I mean, for instance, the swallow and the sand martin and the house martin. They're birds that come in April and I think leave again in August. So they're summertime migrators. Well, they migrate into Ireland in the summertime. And then if you're you know, if you're bringing materials up and down the Boyne River, as you undoubtedly were for the construction of Newgrange and the great monuments, you're undoubtedly going to be aware of the salmon runs, and apparently the greatest of the salmon runs of the year occurs in winter, actually, roughly speaking, from the time of Samhain through winter solstice into Imbolc, and I find that very, very interesting. So if you want to read a little bit more about the salmon and how they might have been observed in prehistoric times in the Boyne Valley, I recommend Robert Hensey's book First Light at Newgrange. First Light, it's very interesting. So I love this time of year. It's, for me, it's a very optimistic time. We don't always get great weather in Ireland in summer. It's not a guarantee. Sometimes in summer we get a lot of rain and we get flooding, and, well, I suppose, as the phrase goes, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. Last year, actually, there's something very interesting. I'm writing a book about the discovery of the new henge of Newgrange last year, which will be published by the Liffey Press in October, and I'm writing about the weather, and not just about the weather last year, but weather patterns previously, because the previous summer was actually a very wet one. But this time last year, on the 5th of May, I was at the Bealtaine Fire Festival, and I remember that marked the beginning of a very warm and dry and sunny period, because it seemed to be sunny and warm and dry most days. And even when there was cloud around, you know, there was no significant amounts of rain. I don't really remember there being rain from the beginning of May, from Bealtaine, all the way through June. And in fact, I don't remember the first significant rainfall in the Boyne Valley until sometime in mid to late July. And so I found that very interesting, and that's the way it can happen sometimes. That was a beautiful warm day that day last year at the Fire Festival at Uisneach. It was a beautiful evening and beautiful sunset. It was a lovely warm day, beautiful sunset, golden sky, and then it faded to blue, and it was a lovely extended blue hour, which again is a feature of this time of year. The twilights get longer as you go into the summer, and when you get to midsummer, as I said earlier, you get no darkness, you get no full darkness, you get extended twilight. The whole northern horizon, all the way from west around through the north to east, has this sort of deep blue colour to it. And actually, if you're out in the countryside and you allow your eyes to adjust, it doesn't get fully dark in midsummer. There's enough light to continue or to carry out a task if you were, for instance, working on the construction of a cairn, which the mythology of Douth suggests that there was endless day, and that the king's sister cast a spell on the sun to make it stand still in the heavens, so that there was endless day. And undoubtedly this is a summer solstice myth, at the time of year when the sun is standing still, i.e. its rising and setting positions, and there is an extended twilight. So yeah, this time of year, all the way through here from now to Lunasa, I find to be a beautifully uplifting time of year. I find it sort of creatively energetic, although I do also find the period immediately after winter solstice to be a very energetically creative period. So don't get me wrong, this isn't the only one. But I suppose the long days, the extended light definitely helps, I think. It definitely helps. It lifts your spirits too. Like, one of the things about living, in Ireland, and living, say, for instance, if you live in Scotland, or you live in northern Germany or Denmark or Scandinavia or Iceland, the further north you go, the more pronounced it becomes, the difference in length of day. And that is something I think that the ancestors who built the great monuments of the Stone Age were acutely aware of, which is why I think they would have marked, well, it's one of the reasons, one of several reasons that I think they would have marked the cross-quarter days. They were significant days in their agricultural calendar, they were significant days in the natural cycle of things, and they were significant days in terms of the approach of the long, bright evenings, or the approach of the short, dark evenings. And long, long, long before the advent of modern, electrified civilization, we call ourselves modern, I don't know how far we've come really. When you sit and think about it, you think about how many people would have had to sit around fires for hours into the evening. In winter solstice, the sun sets shortly before 4 p.m. in the Boyne Valley. It's dark by 5 p.m. Conversely, in summer solstice, now remember, we have to account for the changing of the clocks. The clocks go forward at the end of March and back at the end of October. So you have to account for that change. But at summer solstice, the sun sets at around 10 p.m, shortly before 10 p.m. in the Boyne Valley. Or if you're on the north coast of Ireland, around 20 past 10 p.m. And then you don't get a full night, you just get this extended twilight that lasts through the night. Sun rises again in the Boyne Valley at around 10 to 5 a.m, 5 to 5 in the morning. So you can see how, the day length varies, but that varies much greater as you go north. So, if you're in parts of Scandinavia, northern Norway, for instance, there are days in the summer where the sun does not set below the horizon, so you have endless day, literally. And then there are days in the winter where the sun doesn't rise. I have a friend who lives in Malmo in Sweden, and I think he told me once that in winter they only get 3 hours of sunlight. Oh, 3 hours, and I think about winter solstice, sun rising at 9 a.m. and setting at 4 p.m. So what's that? 7 hours. I think this is as far north as I would like to live. I mean, I like the opposite effect. I like the summer effect, which is, again, a reason for liking this time of year. Now, because we have artificial lighting, and because we live in concrete buildings, and because we've covered our roofs to keep out the rain, of course, it's only natural that we should try to do that. But because we've kind of cut ourselves off from the cosmos and from the night sky and from the day sky, I think in modern Western civilization we're much less aware of the natural cycles than we used to be. We've kind of cut ourselves off from it all. And so, I wonder, apart from those who work in, and I'm generalizing, I know I'm generalizing, so those who work, for instance, in offices, in maybe the civil service, or in private business, who are inside in an office, especially one that doesn't have much in the way of natural light coming in and views of the outside world, might be much less aware of it. Those who are working outdoors, for instance, farmers, anglers, fishermen, those who work in forestry, those who, anybody who works outdoors all the time, and especially those working in agriculture, because they're the ones who see the effects of the growth of the days and see the effects of, the perturbations or the fluctuations in weather patterns most acutely. And so at Bealtaine, this is a real time for kindling the flame, for me, for kindling the flame of creativity and for hope, for the fruits of the harvest of those creative labours. I don't know, and I'm not much of a farmer. I don't know exactly when crops would have been planted in the Neolithic, and I know nowadays we have different varieties of wheat and barley. We have winter barley that has to be sown in winter in order for the proper growth to happen then in the spring and the summer. I don't know much about that, but I know this would have been the time of the year where the Neolithic communities would have been hoping greatly with great enthusiasm for the blessings of good weather, and that doesn't necessarily mean constant sunshine. Actually, the best weather from the point of view of agriculture in Ireland is a reasonably good mixture of sunshine and rain. You don't want too much rain because it's going to flood your land and it's going to damage your crops. You don't want too much sun because your crops aren't going to grow to their full potential, as we saw last summer during the drought, which is a very interesting time in Ireland, during which many archaeological discoveries were made. But we won't go into that now because that's been covered in a lot of other videos and blog posts, and I'm currently writing about it, so you'll be able to buy the book when it comes out. So I hope that you all have a wonderful, not just a wonderful Bealtaine, hoping to meet plenty of people at the Fire Festival, plenty of people who I know, friends, and people who are equally enthusiastic about ancient Ireland and her myths and monuments and landscape, etc., etc. But also extending the best wishes of the summer season to you and all of your family and friends, and in the hope that the summer brings you as many blessings as it will bestow upon you. If you're living in the southern hemisphere, or Australia for instance, well, at this time of year, of course, you've hit your Samhain basically, and you're on the 6-week run into winter solstice, to your shortest days. Now, I'm not going to come out much and sympathise for you, because I know in Australia your winter's a lot warmer than ours. But anyway, I hope that no matter where you are, that Bealtaine and this season is good to you, and looking forward to a wonderful pageant, a wonderful display on Uisneach, where I think it is important that we revitalise, reinvigorate, revivify, rejuvenate, resurrect some of the aspects of our ancient culture, and I think it's a very, very healthy thing for us to do, and it's a lovely community event. Just in case there are the cynics among you who are wondering if it's all about neo-pagans and people chanting and drumming, and well, not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's a particular there are a particular band of people who do it but maybe don't necessarily understand it. And there's plenty of drumming, and there's plenty of music, and there's plenty of costumes, and it's all very wonderfully put together. And then of course the lighting of the fire, and Uisneach vies with Tara with regards to a great fire at a particular time of the year, but again, that's perhaps for another discussion. And I've half an hour of the journey done and an hour to go, and look at that, the sun has come out. So despite the fact that it was overcast earlier, the sun is starting to find gaps through the clouds, and I'm just hoping and keeping the fingers crossed and maybe thinking that we might have a nice view of the sunset this evening and a nice afterglow as the fire is lit at twilight. So thanks for watching, and as usual, just to mention the fact that I've been doing this stuff for 20 years. I've been doing it as a passion. I'm very interested and fascinated by the whole thing, the archaeology and the mythology and the astronomy and the alignments and the landscape and the intricate interweaving of myth and megalith and stars and stones and stories. And I actually do have a day job, but if you would like to support Mythical Ireland and what I do and help me to create videos and help me, to keep my website running and help me to do all these things, then become a patron and become a supporter. Make a very small contribution, doesn't have to be much. Make a monthly contribution, become a patron and get rewards for doing so. Early and exclusive access to lots of things: photographs, announcements, podcasts, blog posts, videos, and you'll get it first, and oftentimes in some cases you'll get it exclusively. But thanks for watching, and if you want to sign up as a patron, it's patreon.com, patreon.com/Mythical Ireland, and we'd love to see you there. Don't forget, if you're on Facebook, Mythical Ireland is on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Mythical Ireland, or look for the Mythical Ireland community, and also on Twitter. The website is mythicalireland.com. The YouTube channel is also youtube.com/Mythical Ireland. Thanks for watching, all the best, have a great Bealtaine, and hope to see you sometime over the summer.